go ahead and talk about or continue our discussion of incident investigation. In the last module, which was module 1-4, we talked about interviewing witnesses. We talked about who to interview, some procedural tips, talked about the difference between unstructured and structured interviews. We talked about recording statements using an electronic recorder. Talked about witness statements and how normally it's not a good idea to just give your witness a piece of paper and tell them to write out their statement. As we said, some of the workers may not be able to write very well. Some of the workers they're not going to take it seriously. They're just going to throw whatever down, a sentence or two, and be done with it. So it's, as safety professionals, when we have an incident, we need to guide the interview process. And as I said in module 1-4, for me, the best approach is an unstructured interview where you start with a simple question: what happened? And then you go from there. And you exercise your critical thinking skills and you go in different directions based upon their response to the simple question of what happened. Now, one thing I mentioned earlier in our discussion of incident investigation, I talked about using phones as our camera and our video recorder. One of our class members is a law enforcement officer. He has experience in law enforcement. He's currently working as a law enforcement officer. He brought up a good point. We need to be careful using our personal phone for incident investigation. That would include any audio recording that we might do with a personal phone, any photographs, any video recording that we might do with a personal phone. Because when we use our personal phone, or any phone for that matter, there's the potential for that phone to be confiscated as evidence by law enforcement, OSHA, or other agencies. We might lose our phone, and they would then have the ability to go through the entire phone and find anything and everything that may or may not be related to the case. So that's something we probably want to avoid. My recommendation, I think it's still okay to use a phone, but use the company phone and make sure you don't have anything incriminating on the phone. Because though I agree with the student who made this suggestion, they can confiscate our phone whether we take pictures on it or not. There have been a few cases where high-profile criminal cases where phones have been confiscated. Probably the most high-profile recent case was the terrorist attack in Southern California a couple of years ago. The FBI found the phone, and they were wanting to go through the phone to gather any information, any relevant information they could off the phone. They couldn't get into the phone. So they contacted Apple to see if Apple would help them get into the phone. Apple said, nope, that breaks our privacy requirements. We're not going to help you get into the phone. The FBI eventually did get into the phone, and they were able to go through the phone looking for any relevant information. So any electronic device that may possibly have evidence on it could be confiscated by OSHA or other agencies. But again, even if you didn't take pictures, they can still confiscate it. So my recommendation, best practice, use a camera, still photos, video cameras. But also on your phone and any other electronic device, make sure it's the company phone that you're using. And don't have anything on there that would be incriminating. If you take photos of a project, as soon as you can, upload those photos to your computer back at the office. Or if you carry a notebook computer with you or a tablet, upload them to the tablet. But of course, they could confiscate those as well. Now, on the flip side of this, in 20 years of investigations, including fatality investigations, working with OSHA, and a lot of other accident investigations as well, no one's ever asked for my phone. But we're in a different day and age now, where people carry their lives on their phone. So I think in this day and age, that's more of a likelihood that that could happen, a greater likelihood that that could happen where your phone could be requested or confiscated. All right, if you have any thoughts on that, email, text. We got Blackboard. Nobody's posted anything on Blackboard. That's fine. I'm not requiring it. But if this is something worthy of discussion and thought, because when you enter into, especially with fatality investigations, or maybe where there's third-party damage that's been done, or a third party has been severely injured or killed by your operations, there's that potential where they're going to come in and they're going to look for every piece of evidence. Another entity that might ask for your phone would be a plaintiff's lawyer. It may not be law enforcement or OSHA, but it could be the plaintiff's lawyer in a civil case where a plaintiff is suing you or your company, you and your company. There's a chance that your phone could be subpoenaed. So, again, try to keep anything incriminating off the phone. All right, one other thing I want to show you is a section from the OSHA Field Operations Manual. The OSHA Field Operations Manual is the manual that OSHA compliance officers follow when they conduct their investigations. Really, it applies to all of everything they do as an OSHA compliance officer. It's guidance for anything they do as a compliance officer. This is the section on interview procedures. And I'm not going to read all these to you, but it's very similar to what I've already talked about as far as interview procedures. This is a great resource for safety managers, for safety professionals. Even if you don't work for OSHA, it's a good idea to know OSHA's perspective on how they're going to come at you as a regulatory agency when there's an issue that they're involved in. It's good to have insight on how they conduct inspections, how they conduct interviews, how they conduct fatality investigations. And that's all in this manual, 280 pages of instructions for OSHA compliance officers. On the page here is the title of the document, OSHA Field Operations Manual, and then the URL if you want to look it up. Now, if you were in my construction management class last summer, I gave you a copy of this manual on the flash drive that I gave you. So you already have it if you were in my construction safety class last summer. But again, here's just a couple of paragraphs on interview procedures. 3 main points here, and then a 4th main point: when interviewing, properly document, reduce interviews to writing and have the witness sign the document. That's, again, when appropriate. But in a lot of industries with our workforce, it's not appropriate. Transcribe video and audio recorded interviews and have the witness sign the transcription. We talked about that. Read the statement back to the witness and obtain their agreement. We talked about that. I just thought that would be worthwhile to throw out there for you. Really, this is more of I really wanted to mention this more as a resource that can be valuable to you once you start work as a safety professional. All right, let's talk about another component of an incident investigation. We can call it a desk audit, document review, go by a lot of different labels. But what you're doing with a desk audit or a document review is reviewing all the pertinent documents, all the paperwork. You're going to look at the safety training that's been conducted. Let's say you had a guy fall off a bridge. Well, part of your investigation is going to go back and take a look at the training documentation. When was the last time he had a fall protection refresher? You also might want to look at the hazard analysis. Again, we'll just use a fall incident as our example through all of these. You want to look at the hazard analysis, and the hazard analysis, did it adequately discuss fall hazards and the methods that were supposed to be used to eliminate the fall hazard? Safety plans. You call it an SOP, an operations analysis, operation safety plan, whatever you want to call it, but you go back and review the safety plans for that operation. Documentation for the pre-work meetings. Most companies will have a requirement where each crew starts the day with a pre-work safety meeting. Some companies call them a take five, some companies call them play of the day, somebody just call them toolbox meetings. There are a lot of different labels, but it should be documented, and there should be evidence of that documentation. You'd want to review that. Also, you would might want to take a look at any inspection records that exist for that particular operation. See if the frontline supervisors were staying on top of their daily inspections. Another document that you might want to take a look at, depending upon the type of accident, is a police report. Anytime I had a serious highway-related or any kind of traffic accident on public roadways, I would request the police report. And they're available. All you got to do is contact the local agency or the Department of Public Safety, Highway Patrol, and they will provide you with a copy of that police report. There have been several traffic accidents where just having that police report was all the ammunition we needed to avoid a lawsuit. One of our company vehicles was involved in an accident with someone else, a third party. The third party makes a fuss, acts like they're going to sue us. So we just pull out the police report. The police report, hey buddy, it says right here you were at fault and you received a ticket. So sue us if you want to. Usually that's where it ends. I've never had again, there's been several, 3 or 4 maybe, cases where that's been helpful. And in each of those cases, it never went beyond them complaining and whining that they were going to sue us. Once we pulled the police report, they shut up from any complaining that they were making. So again, this is a part of our investigation, and by reviewing these documents, that might give us some insight onto why the incident occurred. Another thing to consider during an incident investigation is expert consultation, where you bring in an unbiased third party to help with the investigation. Sometimes, we're working every day with the same people, the same crews. Our perspective can be a little bit biased, whether we intend for it to be or not. Our perspective can be not as objective as it needs to be. By bringing in that third party that's unbiased, they don't know the people, they're not friends with the people. Bringing in those objective, unbiased investigators can help us see problems that we were not able to see because we were too close to the situation. And one of our jobs as a safety manager, we want to try to be objective. We try to be unbiased. That's being a professional. But reality is we will form relationships with the people that we work with every day. And right or wrong, we will form judgments and have opinions about people that we work with every day. Some good, some bad. Some fair, some unfair. Bringing in that third party can help keep us from being keep us from being biased. An example would be a crane accident. If we have a crane accident on one of our jobs, it's a good idea to bring in a third-party crane expert to help us with that investigation. You might call someone from the manufacturer. If it's a Manitowoc crane that's involved, you call someone from Manitowoc. You get them to send out an engineer to help go through the facts of the case and help us maybe understand better what happened. If you have a fall protection failure, you have a case where a guy was tied off but when they fell, their lanyard snapped, and it resulted in a fatality. This actually happened at Kiewit. Not on one of my jobs. It happened in Seattle. You probably heard me talk about it before. The guy was tied off, but when he fell off the lanyard, when he fell off the bridge pier, the lanyard snapped, and he fell about 30 feet to his death. In that particular case, Kiewit contacted the lanyard manufacturer and got them involved in the accident and investigating the accident. Another kind of a sidebar to this Kiewit example, Kiewit also encouraged the plaintiff's or the victim's family to sue the lanyard manufacturer, that third-party lawsuit that we talked about earlier in the semester. If you have an explosion or a fire at your facility, bring in a fire expert. Bring in someone that specializes in fire forensics and reconstructing fires, and they know what to look for when there's a fire or an explosion. Now, all of us as safety professionals, we're going to have a little bit of knowledge in all these areas. And we may be expert in some areas, but we're not going to be experts in all possible areas. So don't let your pride get in the way. I mean, if you think an expert's going to help you understand the accident so that you can prevent that accident in the future, that's what you need to do. Bring in that expert. Bring in an engineer. If you have a soil collapse, an excavation cave-in, bring in a geotechnical engineer, someone who specializes in soil stability. If it's a structural collapse, bring in a civil engineer that would have more expertise in investigating structural collapses. Or it could be a mechanical engineer if it's a problem with a mechanical device. We have a lot of different options here, but again, be willing to bring in expert consultation. On that note, about being willing, as safety professionals, we might be willing, we might want to bring in a third party, but sometimes our bosses will not want a third party sticking their nose into the company's business. So be prepared for company owners, company executives that do not like the idea of bringing in a third party. That's something you might have to, as a safety manager, either you keep pushing, you be persistent, or you just, I tried, can only do so much. And that's one of the frustrations of safety management. Sometimes it's hard to convince the higher ups to do something that they don't want to do. Another thing that you need to be prepared for as a safety manager and working on incident investigations is that sometimes you're going to have third-party investigators that you've got to work with that you don't really want there yourself. I mean, you may want to bring in the expert consultant, but there's also going to be maybe OSHA investigators. If it's a catastrophic incident where someone's been hospitalized or where there's been a fatality, OSHA is going to investigate those accidents. And they're going to be out there doing their investigation, maybe at the same time you're working on your investigation. Another third-party investigator that you may not want on your job would be the insurance company investigator. Insurance companies, if they have a loss, they may send out their experts to investigate the incident. Now, when you have OSHA or the insurance company in your investigation, the best thing you can do is just, don't try to hide anything. Be open, be honest, be polite, work with them. Go at it from the standpoint of you want to find out what happened. These people can help me find out what happened. Even if I don't really like them being here, even if they're being in my way, view that as an opportunity to do a better job in your investigation. And remember, your goal in the investigation is to prevent future occurrences. Another thing when it comes to OSHA or the insurance company, it's never going to be the same day the incident occurred. Well, I shouldn't say never. Never say never. But in my experience, it's never been the same day. Both of the fatality investigations that I was involved with, it was the next day before OSHA got involved. And one of the fatalities, it was the next day before I was able to get there because it happened so late in the day. So it's not like they're going to be right there on top of you the moment after the incident occurred. Now, another issue that we're really not going to get into that you might run into with a serious incident would be journalists. You might have reporters coming out and sticking their nose into your incident. And again, let me go ahead and mention that good companies will have a prepared procedure for when that happens. When a reporter comes to your site and they're trying to get information, one of the best things you can do is say, we're investigating the incident. We don't know what happened. As soon as we know what happened, we will provide a statement. At this time, we are only concerned about the victim's family and finding out what happened. And then tell the reporter that if they're persistent, get them out of the area. They don't have any need to be there. Get them out of the area. I would say kick their butts out of there, but you don't want to resort to violence, and that's really not what I mean when I say kick their butts out of there. But once you've answered their question, letting them know that we will make a statement eventually, but we don't know what happened, and we want to respect the family. Once you've made that statement, they need to leave the area so you can get on with your investigation. Now, whoever's involved, the third party, whatever third party's involved, whether it's an OSHA investigator, an insurance company, or a journalist, be polite. You want to be polite. That's the first thing. But don't let them bully you. Don't answer any questions if you don't know the answer. And that's part of being honest and open. If they ask you, if say OSHA or the insurance company asks you a question and you don't know the answer, just that's the best answer. I don't know. Another thing when dealing with OSHA in an investigation is record as best you can what they say. And also, you don't want to admit any wrongdoing to OSHA. Finally, with these third-party investigators, especially OSHA and the insurance company, remember, they work for you. It's your operation. Don't let them take control. Again, be polite, but don't let them take control. Work with them. Don't let them interfere with what you're trying to do with your investigation. Now, my experience with the 2 fatality investigations and OSHA being involved, I had the same fatality investigator both times. He was a great guy. And hey, a lot of what I learned about investigations, I learned from him. When both of these fatalities happened in my 4th year as a safety professional. I was a new safety professional. First fatalities I ever worked with. He came out, his name's Wayne Irely. I believe he still works out of the Oklahoma City office for OSHA. Wayne came out real laid back, casual. He didn't have a clipboard and a piece of paper, and he wasn't shoving a microphone in my face to take my statement. And he was just real cool about the whole process. He was there to work with us and help us. And his interview style was this conversational style that I came to adopt as my own. It worked. Again, for me, it works. That casual conversational style is the best approach for me. And again, that was the approach that Mr. Irely from OSHA used when he investigated our fatalities, and that's really where I started forming my own philosophy on how to conduct interviews and investigate a fatality or a serious accident. So having said that, most OSHA investigators are going to be good people, just trying to help you, trying to find out what happened. so they can help other companies and prevent this same type of accident from occurring at other companies. Most OSHA investigators aren't going to be out there to put you on the spot and to point fingers and blame you or blame somebody for the incident. Now, having said that, most aren't. You may encounter an OSHA investigator that's not a good investigator, that is not going to be fun to work with. All right, another type of investigation would be a situation where no incident has occurred, but you've received a call, a complaint from either a third party that has nothing to do with your company, or it could be a complaint from an employee. Maybe an employee comes to you and says, "Hey, I saw so-and-so, he was drinking on the job. He pulled a bottle of scotch out of his lunchbox and he took a couple of shots at lunch." Those are difficult situations, but we do need to follow up on them. We do need to see if we can find out if this is really going on. Or it could be, somebody's not using fall protection, or it could be somebody's not using the forklift safely. It could, a whole range of possibilities. They need to be investigated, but keep in mind that a lot of times these complaints are from disgruntled employees, and they're not being entirely honest and accurate when they make the complaint. So go in as objective as possible. Talk to them. If it's an employee that's been accused of drinking on the job, go in and talk to them. Don't bring up the drinking. Just, "Hey, how's it going? How are you doing?" And then go from there. In some situations where you start with that question, "How's it going?" it might very quickly proceed to a question about drinking on the job. Yeah, very difficult situations. I had one drinking on the job complaint that I had to investigate, and he was drinking on the job. It wasn't hard liquor. He kept beer in his ice chest, and he was from the old school where that used to be really common in construction. Nobody batted an eye when somebody had a beer on the job site, but the last 20 years, that's pretty much been unacceptable in any company to have beer or any other kind of alcohol on the job. We were able to get it resolved. It was uncomfortable. It was awkward, but we were able to get it resolved. He remained with the company, and to my knowledge, he never drank again after we investigated the incident and sat him down and had a talk with him, myself and the owner of the company. Another type of complaint, these aren't quite as awkward or uncomfortable because it's coming from somebody outside your company. There's not as much potential for conflict within the company. But a complaint from the public, you'll probably have situations like this, especially if you're one of the industries where everything you do is out in the public, like construction. I would get 2 or 3 complaints a year from somebody driving through our job site. They thought they saw something unsafe. They weren't sure, but you got to check it out. They could come through and say, "Hey, your excavation looks like it's about to cave in." Or we saw somebody not using fall protection. Or one of the most interesting, this happened in Tulsa when I was with Manhattan. We had a third party call in and said they saw one of our workers riding the ball of a crane. What we mean by riding the ball, they would jump up on the headache ball, and the crane operator would hoist them up onto the bridge deck while they were standing on the ball. Again, that used to be real common in construction. Nowadays, it's not good at all. I mean, that'll get somebody fired. But we investigated. We found out what was going on. He wasn't riding the ball. He was up on the load, rigging up the rebar that was coming off the trailer. The ball was right there where the employee was standing, but he wasn't on the ball. Again, can be very difficult doing these kinds of investigations, but you need to do a thorough job, and you need to be sensitive to the possibility that the complaint is from a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled party. One more example. We were working in Tulsa on a job, and we got a call from OSHA. OSHA said, hey, one of your employees called us and said this was going on your job. And it ended up being an employee who was terminated that was pissed off because he got fired. He called OSHA and started accusing us of all these unsafe conditions and unsafe behaviors on our job sites. Well, OSHA called me, talked it over with OSHA, explained who the worker was, what the situation was. They understood. All they required us to do was to make a posting on our job site bulletin board. They didn't come out and investigate. It went no further. I mean, it was clear to us, it was clear to them that this was just an employee who was mad because he got fired. You might run into that type of situation in your career. And again, there's no formula for any of this. A lot of it will come down to your critical thinking skills and your people skills. Getting other people involved also. You're the safety manager, but you don't have to bear the responsibility for everything. Get the project managers involved, get the plant manager involved, get one of your executives involved in the process. Also, 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 2. Generally speaking, more people you get involved, that lightens your load a little bit and takes some of that pressure off of you as a safety manager. All right, I'm going to end our discussion of incident investigation on that note. We're not done with this unit, though. When we come back, we're going to talk about root cause analysis and identifying root causes.